My name is Amjid Ali. I'm a kidney transplant recipient. I spent 23 and a half years on dialysis before I received a living kidney donation from my nephew. I have the privilege and honour of leading the Transplantation in Islam project on behalf of NHS Blood and Transplant. My journey with NHS Blood and Transplant actually goes back to 1987 in terms of my first diagnosis of kidney disease. That was just a week after my 20th birthday, where I was diagnosed with chronic renal failure. At that time, the diagnosis came so late that there was no option other than to go on to dialysis to keep me alive. I then spent 23 and a half years on dialysis, waiting for a successful transplant. And that was the time after which I approached NHS Blood and Transplant about the issue of organ donation within the Muslim community, and how is it that Muslims weren't donating as actively as other members of society in the UK. Having worked in the financial services sector, where I was working closely with the Muslim community, looking at a product that was based on Islamic principles, one of the key understandings that came across was that faith played an important role in their decision-making process. And we were looking at an audience that had kind of three attitudinal segments in terms of their mindset. They were either interested but uninformed, interested but cautious, or completely were against whatever it was that you were putting to them, unless it was ratified by a scholar or an imam that they had a particular affiliation or trust in. And looking at the issue of organ donation, we're in similar kind of territory. All of the research that NHS Blood and Transplant have done, and the work that Professor Gurch Randhawa has done also separately, reaffirms that religion and culture play a key role in the decision-making process. So this is where I put forward a proposal document to NHSBT, where we were talking about how do we engage the community in a manner that develops and creates a trust and understanding that we respect the role that culture plays in their decision making, as well as the role of faith in the daily life of a Muslim. I reached out to approximately 56 community stakeholders and organisations across the UK that had Muslim affiliation and Muslim background, bringing them together to talk about the challenges and the dilemma that the Muslim community face when it comes to organ donation, based on my own lived experience of waiting 23 and a half years for a transplant. And the overwhelming response to that question was that, yes, we can't sit on our hands and do nothing. We have to play a more active role. Some were of the view that this is already, in their mind, permissible within the framework of Sharia, Islamic law. And others were saying, well, we're on a process of a journey where we need to either do further research, or we need to seek a guidance from our own peers in order to confirm to ourselves that we weren't doing anything that was incorrect. The other thing that's also really important to me, based on, again, my own history of working with the Muslim community, was to ensure that we were taking on the views of all our community stakeholders. And often where faith is concerned, and we've got Islamic scholars and imams, there is a tendency for those types of meetings to be male dominated. So what we did was organize a separate workshop for Muslim sisters, and reassuringly for me, that the same message came back out. This is an important issue. Members of our community are adversely affected by the lack of donation from Black, Asian and minority ethnic donors, and that as a community we need to collectively take responsibility for this and work with NHS Blood and Transplant and other key players to develop a program of engagement. One of the things that then became quite apparent was that there was a general appetite to move forward, but there were certain key questions that still remained a bit of a barrier to moving forward. And one of them particularly was the issue of diagnosis of death using neurological criteria. And based on the feedback from some of our key scholars, particularly Mufti Muhammad Zubair Butt, who had been with us on this journey from the very beginning, and based on his historical learning and experience, this for him was a key issue. We held another workshop in July 2018 with a team of clinical intensivists, together with some transplant surgeons, who spent the day talking through the process of diagnosing death using neurological criteria. What it did was enable them to move to a position where they felt comfortable that they had sufficient information to at least start the process of looking at this in more detail. We need to, as a community, move from our position, but we need some guidance from our thought leaders from an Islamic perspective. I would like to think I've kind of encouraged a team of scholars to actively play a role in this, and Mufti Muhammad Zubair was one of the first to come forward to say, look, I feel this is important, the time is now right. He felt that he needed to have some degree of clarity around some of the issues and concerns that he felt weren't properly addressed in some of the previous fatwas that were issued in the UK, as well as those that are more globally renowned. And I'm pleased to say that that's where we are today. Having this updated religious edict is, for me now, a starting point. The issue of organ donation and transplantation has been debated across the Muslim world for the last 60 years. This is just another opinion by a respected independent scholar of Sunni background, of South Asian heritage, which I hope will address some of the concerns from the largest majority of Muslims in the UK that are from the Indian subcontinent, and of a particular school of thought which perhaps in the other fatwas weren't adequately represented. It's really important that our community, my community, sees this as an opportunity to start the conversation. It may not tick all the boxes for everybody, but what it does is it brings home that there is a need within our community, but there are other patients, young and old, who are faced with the dilemma and the challenge of waiting for an organ. And sadly, on some occasions, some are losing their lives because of that wait. And we can't not do anything about that. We have to, as a community, work together in order to move forward. I know the personal impact that it had on me and my family. If it wasn't for my family, friends, particularly my wife and my daughter, who provided me with that love and support through all the challenging times, there would have been occasions where I've thought, can I carry on? I also owed a huge debt of gratitude to my nephew, who stepped forward at the 11th hour when it was absolutely desperate for me to have a transplant, and without hesitation, he was tested along with other family members and was found to be a suitable match. And that's why I'm here today. Having talked about my journey with other patients, I found that many of them feel deeply uncomfortable reaching out to their community and talking to them about the fact that they're in need of an organ. And they feel a sense of guilt that they don't want to burden anybody with their problems and almost feel voiceless. And for me, that's where perhaps I feel I can make that difference. And on their behalf, reach out to the community and say, look, the outcomes are this. You can give somebody their life back, an opportunity to spend time, quality time with their family, and to live a more meaningful life without the challenge of dialysis or other treatments because of their chronic conditions. What I hope will happen now, and there's already a tremendous amount of good work that's being undertaken by lots of individuals and community organizations to raise the profile of organ donation, is that this will provide them with that additional layer of reassurance that the community are asking for, in a manner that is respecting their cultural differences and their religious needs, but also will provide a framework for the scholarly community and our imams to broaden the conversation amongst themselves as well as their congregations. So in terms of, is the hard work done or is that yet to come? I think that's yet to come. Over the course of the next 9 to 12 months, I very much hope that we will have opportunity to work with the umbrella groups, with the charities, with the local mosques and other Muslim organizations to talk about this issue, provide them with the facts and information, facilitate that dialogue that is much needed in order to move this agenda forward. And as we say as Muslims, God willing, that there will be this traction that we're looking for. We don't expect change to happen overnight, but as they say, every journey starts with that single step. And I hope that this is that step that takes us in the right direction.